Don in London. Hi. One of my videos all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. This one is the step 12 reading of the 12 steps, which are in this book, the 12 steps and 12 traditions, which I hope you can see there. Big copy, big writing, glasses on. Yeah, I'm in recovery from addiction to alcoholic in recovery one day at a time. And the videos I do, well, it's just one voice in recovery, and many voices are needed, I have found, to find out how to be sober one day at a time. That my videos are out there simply, sometimes people are not able to read for whatever reason. In early recovery for me it was confusion. I read everything and could take nothing in. So why not do videos on recovery, asked and answered by those who asked me. So a record of how to do them, I guess, the 12 steps, and I will follow with the 12 traditions when I have the ability to do them. Before that I share the AA preamble, and in all my videos I add in bits which I feel are appropriate as they come to me as I read each of these steps. Again, I must emphasise it's the many voices in the fellowship that make the difference in recovery. So it's the similarities we look for, because we are all unique and different, but with similarities when it comes to learning how to be sober. And it's a one-day program all about how to be open, honest and willing, utilising the 12 steps, or 12 principles which work in life. They're sort of timeless steps. They work anywhere at any time if they are appropriate. So what is AA? I share the AA preamble always at the beginning, which is on this little card. On the back of it is also the Serenity Prayer, which is important to me. It helps with what I can do and can't do in the moment of now, and the wisdom to know the difference. And inside it, this card is available at most meetings of AA who have the money for literature. And you'll know why it's poor. A sort of prudent reserve, we call it, enough money to pay costs. Anyway, the AA preamble. What is AA? Excuse me. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So there are no rules, laws or regulations in AA to govern your behaviour. We are in fellowship under the banner of unity, service and recovery, helping each other stay sober one day at a time. And the reason why this AA preamble is important, it's shared at the beginning of every meeting I go to, so people are reminded that we are working together in unity, service and recovery, sharing experience, strength and hope about how to be open, honest and willing to learn life all over again, every day. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions, and we only keep a prudent reserve. That is enough money to get by, so that issues of money and anything else are never an issue in AA. And everybody's a trusted servant, so nobody has their hands on the kitty, as it were. How we spend money is down to the groups of AA and any trusted servants who are working on behalf of the groups of AA. Normally a treasurer, and the same applies to the bigger organisation of the fellowship, because it need be organised a bit, but it's not organised with leaders telling you what to do. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. So although people in the fellowship are affiliated to so many things, it's untrue. Well, it's true. Everybody's affiliated to something, and everybody has beliefs about the world and anything to do with God as well. Some people are atheists, some are agnostic, some believe. But it's the God of your understanding, or your higher power, which counts when it comes to working the steps. And good conscience and the wisdom of others helps me always gain perspective in my life. So we don't tell people what to do, and we don't impose our views on others, but we will hear the views of everyone about their lives, because we share experience, strength and hope. And some people can be dogmatic. Some people feel their outlook may seem like they belong to a cult, but AA is neither of those things. It's neither dogmatic or a cult. But you might find people who have those qualities, if you like, in their lives. It's your choice what you do. And if anybody's trying to tell you what to do, kindly suggest that they move along in whatever words suit you. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So that's the primary purpose, is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So we have human beings doing human things and being human, all making mistakes, all making successes, all working out what they need rather than want. So if we cover our basic needs, we're on track. Sober today, and then work on the rest. And to be sober, these 12 steps help. So the 12th step, step 12, is as important as all the steps, as is step 1, being powerless over alcohol, and if I were to drink again, life would be unmanageable. For me, step 2, came to believe a power greater than me could restore me to sanity, and that power greater than me turns out to be truth, love and wisdom. The truth of now, which I'm learning about, not the history of what I thought it should be, and it's not my opinion or belief, so it's the absolute truth I'm looking at, hopefully, across where I am. Love, based on love, and wisdom I get from others. So the 12 steps help me, and then the truth, love and wisdom of now, my higher power, keeps me from going backwards into old attitudes and old behaviours, old thinking and old drinking habits. Step 3 was all about let go and let God help me. So let go and let truth, love and wisdom help me. Good conscience, the good conscience of other people, direction from a greater source of wisdom. That's everybody. And I can keep on learning. So I don't need to know it all anymore, and I'm not a know-it-all. I know enough just now. Needs met, once forgotten. So let God, or let go and let good things happen. Then step 4, it was life story, my life story. The good and bad of me, my assets and liabilities. And then step 5, sharing it with another human being and opening up to a higher power, my conscience, good conscience hopefully. Step 6 was looking at my liabilities, extremes of fear, putting on a brave face, and ego to cover up shame, guilt and anything else I felt inadequate about, my deficits if you like. And step 7, all about assets, courage, faith and confidence based on real life, based on listening to other people, learning to develop my faith. So a little bit of fear is okay, some faith based on reality. It's a balance in between the two. So the brave face no longer needed, courage to be me, and confidence built on doing the right thing, one day at a time. So all these steps are working live, if you like, right now. And the other part of that, so keep it on going. Step 8, make a list of amends to people I've harmed and be willing to make them. And then in consultation in step 9, finding out which amends to make and when, make restitution, and not look for other people to reply back. I'm not looking for their apology or their part in it. I'm just looking for making amends for my part in what I might have done to harm other people without doing further harm. Step 10, all about the spot inventory or continued inventory taking. What's working, what's not working. Spot check, how am I doing? Why am I in this situation? Is it working? So it's looking at the big picture always. And step 11, all about prayer and meditation. How prayer and meditation can work continuously to improve my conscious contact with a higher power, truth, love and wisdom, and some call it God, some call it good conscience. It's your choice, your understanding which works in your life. And now here we are, step 12, which says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So step 12, it is the culmination of understanding where we are and learning about the steps, and then how we put things into practice on a daily basis. So here we go, and as I say, I add as I go along. So please feel free to work it out when you're ready to share and listen to the steps, or read them for yourself, or ask somebody to read them to you. Then work out what it means to you as you go along. This is how the steps work, because they work in real life. So here we go. The joy of living is the theme of AA's 12th step, and action is its key word. Here we turn outward towards our fellow alcoholics who are still in distress. Here we experience the kind of giving that asks no reward. Here we begin to practice all 12 steps of the program in our daily lives, so that we and those about us may find emotional sobriety. In other words, being able to cope with the moment of now. When the 12th step is seen in its full implication, it is really talking about the kind of love that has no price tag on it, and that's an unconditional love. And as I often say, what is life about? It's to love, be loved and useful, and the usefulness of any vessel often is having space in it. The usefulness of any vessel can be in its emptiness, and as we let go of the old world, the old attitudes, the old behaviour, and we learn new ones, there is the gap. So early on we fill the gap with massive amounts of activity to keep away from drink, and then we find we have space, and sometimes that can be depressing because we don't know what to do with it. It's a feeling of boredom and agitation and not knowing. So the steps help us get focus and help us understand what we can and cannot do on a daily basis. Can do, change our attitudes. Cannot do, we cannot change people, places and things. Not our job. Our job is to make good choices based on what we know, without harming other people, and including them as we need to. Our 12th step also says that as a result of practicing all the steps, we have each found something called a spiritual awakening. And for me, the spiritual awakening has been of an educational variety, which is spiritual, as one cleric said, is the ability to cope with what's going on now. See life as it is, life on life's terms. So my awakening happens every day when I wake up to a new day. So spiritual awakenings keep on happening, but it's life, real life, based on truth, love, wisdom. To new AAs, this often seems like a very dubious and improbable state of affairs. What do you mean when you talk about a spiritual awakening? They ask. Maybe there are as many definitions of spiritual awakening as there are people who have found them. And actually, everything is spiritual, but are we awake to reality and life as it is now? This is my interpretation. So please work out what is right for you. And this is how we do it. We work out what is right for each other. We don't know. We work out what is right for us as individuals. So we're not trying to join in somebody else's spiritual experience, because we can't, but we can share reality with them, what is real. So it's all happening in each of us, and it's working with good conscience or conscience and a higher power of your own understanding. So as many spiritual awakenings as there are people. But certainly each genuine one has something in common with all the others. All these things which they have in common are not too hard to understand, but they were for me, because I was a bit befuddled when I first came into AA. When a man or woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being, in other words, letting go of the old and starting something new. He has been set on a path which tells him he is really going somewhere, that life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, he has been transformed because he has laid hold of a source of strength which, in one way or another, he had hitherto denied himself. I denied myself reality, new ways of looking at the world, and not waking up with a different attitude. He finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, unselfishness, peace of mind, and love of which he had thought himself quite incapable. What he has received is a free gift, and yet usually, at least in some small part, he has made himself ready to receive it. Open, honest and willing, we say the steps start with B. So if we are open to the spiritual awakening, able to cope with reality and be with people, that is a big awakening. It's quite frightening as well, because relating to people anew, when we come out of isolation and are all thinking that we need to do it our way rather than the big way, or thy way, the big highway, then we are engaging in life in a completely different way, where we are equal to others but not superior, and we don't have more rights than them. And this is my philosophy, but your philosophy is your philosophy, and I hope it develops in a way which suits you and doesn't hurt other people. AA's manner of making ready to receive this gift lies in the practice of the 12 steps in our program. So let's consider briefly what we have been trying to do up until this point, which is what I was trying to do at the beginning as well. Step 1 showed us an amazing paradox. We found that we were totally unable to be rid of the alcohol obsession until we first admitted that we were powerless over it. In step 2, we saw that since we could not restore ourselves to sanity, some higher power must necessarily do so if we were to survive. And the higher power is as you come to understand it. Consequently, in step 3, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And the care of God as you understand is your understanding, or your higher power, or the wisdom of life, providence, learning always, every day, how we can be included with free choices and not making choices for other people unless we have to when we're nurturing. And I say that with a very careful qualification. We're not here to make people like us. For the time being, we who were atheist or agnostic discovered that our own group of AA as a whole would suffice as a higher power. Beginning with step 4, we commenced to search out those things in ourselves which have brought us to physical, moral and spiritual bankruptcy. The life story, writing it all down, or sharing it, depending on our writing skills, which may be a bit shattered or non-existent when we first come to the fellowship. So whatever way of getting out the life story is perfectly acceptable, and it doesn't have to be a task which is difficult unless we make it so by not trying to do it honestly. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory, and then looking at step 5, we decided that an inventory taken alone wouldn't be enough. And I tried it on my own, and it wasn't enough, because I kept on leaving parts out which I didn't want people to know about. And then I took my worst feeling and anxiety about not being good enough, and incidents in my past where I tried to cover up my defects or deficits, my personality traits which I did not like in the end, and wrote them down first, or shared them first, and then I found that most people had the same sort of thing. So I wasn't as bad as I thought, or certainly no worse than anybody else. We knew we would have to quit the deadly business of living alone with our conflicts, and in honesty confide these to God and another human being, or to learn the truth, love and wisdom It's about defining where we self-harmed and harmed others by our personal characteristics, and then looked at the good stuff that we had as well, that we weren't all bad after all, but to share and confide these. So it was a confession of the truth of us, and the more truthful and honest we were, the less burdened we were when we finished. At step 6, many of us balked for the practical reason that we did not wish to have all our defects of character removed, because we still loved some of them too much. That's instincts out of proportion to reality. Yet we knew we had to make a settlement with the fundamental principle of step 6. So we decided that while we still had some flaws of character, and we all do, that we could not yet relinquish, we ought nevertheless to quit our stubborn, rebellious hanging on to them. We said to ourselves, this I cannot do today, perhaps, but I can stop crying out, no, never, letting go of things, my own beliefs, which I thought were right, but patently weren't, and personality traits and attitudes and behaviour which were just unhelpful. And it's contingent on the day, I ask, with all of these steps. This is how it works. We don't just do them and forget them. We live them. They're principles. They're timeless. Then in step 7, we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. For me, those were my shortcomings, not enough faith, courage and confidence. So I needed to develop faith, courage and confidence based on real life, and learn life, and have the humility to keep on learning. We humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings, such as He could or would under the conditions of the day we asked. So given the day we have, sometimes it can be frightening, because there's new stuff we just don't understand. It's then having enough courage, faith and confidence to ask for help, to seek help, and don't worry that help is required. It's okay not to know these days, but ignorance is not bliss once we know we need some help. So contingent on the day we are in, asking for help. In step 8, we continued our house cleaning, for we saw that we were not only in conflict with ourselves, but also with people and situations in the world in which we lived. We had to begin to make our peace, and so we listed the people we had harmed, and became willing to set things right, make restitution. We followed this up in step 9, making direct amends to those concerned, except when it would injure them or other people. By this time, at step 10, we had begun to get a basis for daily living, and we keenly realised that we would need to continue to take personal inventory. At that, when we were in the wrong, we ought promptly admit it. So step 10, the spot inventory. I suppose it's looking at our part in things, what's disturbing us. So we look to make the amend immediately and stop behaving as we may have done in the past. We can always feel it. There's that feeling in the stomach and the hot under the collar feeling, which often makes us feel, let's return to the old angry me and stomp my way through this or out of it. It doesn't work because it just harms us as much as it may harm other people. So step 10 is an ongoing maintenance step. In step 11 we saw that if a higher power had restored us to sanity and had enabled us to live with some peace of mind in a sorely troubled world, then such a higher power was worth knowing better by as direct contact as possible. The persistent use of meditation and prayer, as you come to understand for yourself, we found did open the channel, so that where there had been a trickle, then there was now a river, which led to sure power and safe guidance from God, truth, love and wisdom in my case, as we were increasingly better able to understand Him, or just better able to understand providence, what is happening right now, our part in it, the big picture, that we are on the stage like everybody else, and we have a right to be there. But if we have a right to be there, so does everyone else too. So it's prayer and meditation to the good of living is blinking brilliant in my view. And in step 11 of this one, it has a very good step 11 prayer, which is about self-forgetting and humility to keep on learning life and how we can love people, be loved back, and useful. useful in anything that we choose to do, and also choose to be involved in, included in, a part of. Family, community, society, as we are able, as we go along, not as we might demand or feel we are owed or deserved. It doesn't work like that. It's about being included and not utilising. It's about being included and a part of. And prayer meditation sharpens us to what we can and cannot do daily, and the wisdom growing daily for that day often, and next day we have to start again. The good news is this all becomes very, very automatic to do the new stuff rather than the old stuff. So we spot check ourselves when the old stuff is bubbling up, anger, resentment and all that sort of stuff. It will, hang on a minute, where am I right now? That's how step 10 and 11 work together. So practicing these steps, we had a spiritual awakening about which finally there was no question. Looking at those who were at the beginning, or were only beginning and still doubted themselves, the rest of us were able to see the change setting in. And it's very true when I see a newcomer come in from misery, denial, rejecting AA because it's the very last thing they want, who wants to give up that thing which is making life possible or just bearable. It's very hard. So when the newcomer starts to make a change from old ways to their own personal new way of seeing the world, their own personal way forward, based on help, support, sharing and experience around in the groups and meetings of AA, what serves them in their lives, openness, honesty and willingness, it is massive as a change. It's an absolute turnaround. And you can't see it in yourself, because you just can't see it. It's a gradual change usually. It's not an overnight, wow, here I am in my new life. It takes time. After all, we are human, and letting go of stuff is very, very hard. Looking at those who were only beginning and still doubted themselves, the rest of us were able to see the change setting in. From great number of such experiences, we would predict that the doubter who still claimed that he hadn't got the spiritual angle, and who still considered his well-loved AA the higher power, would presently love God and call him by name. But it doesn't matter if you don't, because it may not be in you to do that, because your life experience says otherwise, or your life experience may lead you to believe in a power greater than you, which you call God. I tend to call it providence, truth, love and wisdom, but the word God does not disturb me as it used to, as if it had a power over me. After all, when I worked out that I was powerless over alcohol, people, places and things, and life would get unmanageable if I started drinking again, I still had freedom of choice once I'd let go the booze and let go trying to organise the rest of the world to my way of looking at it. So not playing God seemed to be the answer. So we all say things like, oh my God, and God is a feature of life. No matter how we may wish to adjust ourselves to a personal view, there is, oh my God, there is a God. Or, oh my God, what is happening? It's clarifying to find the truth of now, and the wisdom what to do next. Now what about the rest of the 12th step? And don't forget, please, these are my interpretations which help me understand and live the 12 steps. So we all learn what works for us, and it will be pretty similar, but it may be different in how we view it, and that's perfectly acceptable, because how else would it work? So it's not about you adopting my understanding, it's about you continually learning what your understanding is. So now, what about the rest of the 12th step? The wonderful energy it releases and the eager action by which it carries our message to the next suffering alcoholic, and which finally translates the 12 steps into action upon all our affairs, is the payoff, the magnificent reality of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the magnificent reality for me is reality, or more of it. Less filters, less denials, more open to the truth, love and wisdom of now. And AA, the fellowship, the steps, have helped me do this, without a doubt. So it's every single person, every single voice I hear, every interpretation, understanding, which helps me understand for myself how these 12 steps come to work in reality and gain the ability to cope with now. Emotional balance, reality, and spiritual. Spiritual is everything. It's just the clarity we get as part of the spiritual awakening to see life on life's terms. Where else would it be except now? Even the newest of newcomers finds undreamed rewards as he tries to help his brother alcoholic. And this is about how to share a message. It is simple. We open up and share. The one who is even blinder than he. This is needed. This is indeed the kind of giving that actually demands nothing. He does not expect his brother sufferer to pay him or even to love him, and then he discovers that by the divine paradox of this kind of giving he's found his own reward, whether his brother has yet received anything or not. His own character may still be gravely defective, or, in other words, our personality traits are still full of the dark of how we used to look at the world through the bottom of a glass. But he somehow knows that God, or a higher power, has enabled him to make a mighty beginning, and he senses that he stands at the edge of new mysteries, joys and experiences of which he has never even dreamed. And the new mystery, quite frankly, is seeing reality for the first time without thinking the world is against me or I need to control it. The new mystery is being a part of, included and loved. Practically every AA member declares that no satisfaction has been deeper and no joy greater than in 12th step, job well done. To watch the eyes of men and women open with wonder as they move from darkness into light, to see their lives quickly filled with new purpose and meaning, to see whole families reassembled, to see the alcoholic outcast receive back into his community in full citizenship, and above all to watch these people awaken in the presence of a loving God in their lives. These things are the substance of what we receive as we carry AA's message to the next alcoholic. Nor is this the only kind of 12th step work. We sit in AA meetings and listen, not only to receive something ourselves, but to give the reassurance and support which our presence can bring. So just by being there is wonderful, because we listen and hear. But at the same time, just by being there, we are a presence. If our turn comes to speak at a meeting, we again try to carry AA's message. Whether our audience is one or many, it is still 12-step work. There are many opportunities, even for those who feel unable to speak at meetings, or who are so situated that we cannot do much face-to-face 12th step work. We can be the ones who take on unspectacular but important tasks that make good 12th step work possible, perhaps arranging for the coffee and cake after meetings or during meetings, where so many sceptical, suspicious newcomers have found confidence and comfort in the laughter and talk. This is 12th step work in its very best sense of the word. Freely ye have received, freely give, is the core of this part of 12th step work, or just the 12th step. And for me, in my early days, excuse me, I've got 2 slipped discs and a lot of pain this morning. In my early days, I loved greeting, which was just saying hello, how are you, this is the meeting, I'm on the doorstep to say hi. So just greeting people, be they newcomer or old timer. It starts something going, and then people get into the meeting. And I was tea maker for 3 years in one meeting, which is a bit greedy of me to be tea maker, but I liked it because I got to know everyone and share some small talk, laughter, and just be cheerful when I could be. I was never really uncheerful during those times, outwardly, but inwardly there was quite a lot going on. So we learn, and then there are things like looking after the money, which I didn't particularly enjoy doing. but at least it got to where it needed to get to pay the rent, tea, coffee, and send some off for literature. So we all work in different ways, and just by being there is the most important, to be listening and then maybe sharing in a one-to-one conversation or just having a general chat about life. We may often pass through the 12-step experience. We may often pass through 12-step experiences where we will seem to be temporarily off the beam. These will appear as big setbacks at the time, but will be seen later as stepping stones to better things. In other words, we can't help everyone. We're not everybody's cup of tea, and some people will just genuinely not like us. And that's okay. That is by the pledge in AA. I am responsible when anyone anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA to be there, and for that I am responsible. That particular one, the setbacks can be rejection. So the hand of AA could be another person's hand, because we certainly aren't everybody's cup of tea, or coffee, or whatever it happens to be. These will appear as big setbacks at the time. It can be hurtful that we're not everybody's cup of tea. But I've come to the conclusion that's perfectly okay. For example, we may set our hearts on getting a particular person sobered up, and after doing all we can for months, we will see him relapse. Perhaps this will happen in a succession of cases, and we may be deeply discouraged as to our ability to carry AA's message. But the whole point of fellowship is, if our message isn't working, there probably is somebody else who may be a lot more appropriate, and hanging on like grim death I was going to say, to try and be the one that saves somebody is not the answer. It's the hand of AA, it's the fellowship, the many voices. There will be a hand there somewhere who may be able to help that newcomer or that person who's facing relapse and starting again. We're not everybody's cup of tea. Or we may encounter the reverse situation, in which we are highly elated because we seem to have been successful. Here the temptation is to become rather possessive of these newcomers. And all I know is sponsorship in AA is about the steps. And if we develop friendships, it's better for them to get another person to be their sponsor, because objectivity will help a person through the steps rather than a loving friendship. And we can always be a friend. That can go on forever, but sometimes sponsors are there for a particular period of time, and some of the steps, maybe not all of them. We all need to be flexible. Yes, here the temptation is to become rather possessive of these newcomers. Perhaps we try to give them advice about their affairs which we aren't really competent to give, or ought not to give at all. After all, we are forever non-professional people. And if a person needs professional advice on a medical or some other part of their life, they need to have the right professional advice. And certainly we are not doctors in AA. Then we are hurt and confused when the advice is rejected, or when it is accepted and brings still great confusion. By a great deal of ardent 12-step work, we sometimes carry the message to so many alcoholics that they place us in a position of trust. They make us, let us say, the group's chairman. Here again we are presented with the temptation to overmanage things, and sometimes this results in rebuffs and other consequences which are hard to take. So, for example, if you have an idea which will be really helpful to the group, and the group like you, and somehow you become the secretary of the group, and then you take on responsibility far beyond what the secretaries are there to do, you're taking on leadership roles which are not appropriate. Everybody has a point of view in AA, and if we have some suggestion which works, but if we are put on a pedestal, or we feel we ought to guide the group, we are taking a mantle which is not helpful. Everyone needs to have their say. Everybody is equal in their voice. It's democratic anarchy, or anarchic democracy, as some people say. So sometimes, if we feel that people are starting to follow us one way, maybe we ought not offer to be the leader, or try to be the leader. It will backfire big time on us. Then the group starts to look to us always to fix it, and then we are overburdened, and people then get cross because we can't do what they think we ought to do. our expectations become resentment under construction. But we all like a bit of limelight, don't we? Yeah, here again we are presented with the temptation to overmanage things, and sometimes this results in rebuffs and other consequences which are hard to take. But in the longer run, we clearly realise that these are only the pains of growing up as an individual, as me, and that nothing but good can come from it, even when it hurts us, if we turn more and more to the entire 12 steps for the answers. Now comes the biggest question yet. What about the practice of these principles in all our affairs? Can we love the whole pattern of living as eagerly as we do the small segment of it we discover when we try to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety? Can we bring the same spirit of love and tolerance into our sometimes deranged family lives that we bring to our AA group? So in other words, can we practice these principles in all our affairs, in all walks of life? Can we bring the same spirit of love and tolerance? Yes. Yes, I feel we can, but we have to practice it, see what happens. Can we have the same kind of confidence and faith in these people who have been infected and sometimes crippled by our own illness that we have in our sponsors? People have to learn like we do, but we're not there to impose our views on others. Can we actually carry the AA spirit into our daily work? Can we meet our newly recognised responsibilities to the world at large? And can we bring new purpose and devotion to the religion of our choice? Can we find a new joy of living in trying to do something about all these things? Furthermore, how shall we come to terms with seeming failure or success? Can we now accept and adjust to either without despair or pride? Can we accept poverty? I did. I didn't have to accept it. It was a reality. Well, I accepted it because it was real. Loneliness and bereavement with courage and serenity. And only by learning through living reality have we been able to do that. Can we steadfastly content ourselves with the humbler, yet sometimes more durable satisfactions when the brighter, more glittering achievements are denied us? So not everybody can be chief executive, not everybody can be a leader of X, Y and Z, not everybody, well, actually not everybody wants to. Can we be content in living our lives with the freedom and choices which are open to us based on reality? We're not actually being denied anything there. I think often people find themselves in high places and then become distorted. They don't know how they got there, they don't know how to behave, and then they start to value themselves by the job and material things. I don't know about other people. I'm not inside their heads, so I can't say. The AA answer to these questions about living is yes, all of these things are possible. We know this because we see monotony, pain and even calamity turned to good use by those who keep on trying to practice the 12 steps. And if these facts of life, for the many alcoholics who have recovered in AA, they can become the facts of life for many more. So by living to the truth, open, honest and willing, in unity rather than exclusion, these principles become part of our lives. Some people see what we're doing and like it and follow in, not follow, but they join in equally. And some people don't like it and they'll move away, or we'll move away. But it's not about imposing our will or our attitudes and outlooks on other people. It's about living to good conscience. And of course, all AAs, even the best, fall far short of such achievements as a consistent thing. True of me, I'm only human, and sometimes I've just got to learn it all over again. Without necessarily taking that first drink, we often feel quite far off the beam. Our troubles sometimes begin with indifference. We are sober and happy in our AA work. Things go well at home and the office. We naturally congratulate ourselves on what later proves to be a far too easy and superficial point of view. We temporarily cease to grow because we feel satisfied that there is no need for all AA's 12 steps for us. We are doing fine on a few of them. Many we are doing fine. Maybe we are doing fine on only 2 of them, the first step and that part of the 12th step which says where we carry the message. In AA slang, that blissful state is known as two-stepping, and it can go on for years because we don't need to change any further and life is just tickety-boo and moving along. We are missing out on something really quite huge. How to get deep, broad and cherish life and love life as much as we love people and being loved back and useful. So step 1 and 12 may have their obvious charms and make us feel okay on a superficial level, but what about the empty gap inside created by all that stuff we've given up? How does that all come into some sort of new spiritual focus, living reality and coping with it? And there can only be a personal understanding of these things. The best intentions of all of us can fall for the two-step illusion. Sooner or later the pink cloud stage wears off and things go disappointingly dull. So after the sparkly bit, where suddenly we find life is bright because we can just see it and we like the daylight again, and we can share about our powerlessness and unmanageability, and then share a story, then what about the other bits in between, steps 2 to 11, where the real nuts and bolts of how to live a pretty deep and interesting life? How do we get there? Well, knowing the steps is part of it. Then perhaps life as it is has a way of doing suddenly what hands a way of, say it again, then perhaps life as it has a way of doing suddenly hands us a great big lump that we can't begin to swallow, let alone digest. We fail to get a worked for promotion, we lose that job. Maybe there are serious domestic or romantic difficulties, or perhaps that boy we thought God was looking after becomes a military casualty. Dealing with life on life's terms. We can't predict it. There's lots going on which is just beyond we can't make it so. What then? Have we alcoholics in AA got, or can we get, the resources to meet these calamities which comes to so many? These were problems of life which we could never face up to. Can we now, with the help of God, that is truth, love and wisdom in my case, as we understand Him, handle this or handle them as well and as bravely as our non-alcoholic friends often do? How do we grieve? How do we bounce back? How do we say, right, we've got to let all that stuff go and start again, and say, it's in the journey and not in the destination? And how do we deal with grief and denial? Because that is also a reality. Denial is a fair process, needed in times of great calamity. And I hope whoever is going to get into that ambulance will be okay. The siren's going by. Can we transform these calamities into assets, sources of growth and comfort to ourselves and those about us? Well, we surely have a chance if we switch on from 2-stepping to 12-stepping. If we are willing to receive that grace of God, which can sustain and strengthen us in any catastrophe, grace and humility to keep on learning. It's like love, deep, it's a cherishing act. It's a cherishing of being. Lost love is grief beyond its heartbreak. As we learn to cope with the reality of these very difficult times, we get battered and scarred, and that's where we get our wisdom and how we share it and how we share about it. The deep feelings that we actually get to feel, rather than the superficiality and indifference that is on offer from material and alcohol. You can't deeply love inanimate things. I suppose that's true. We can cherish humans. I don't know, I can't speak for other people. Our basic troubles are the same as everyone else's, but when an honest effort is made to practice these principles in all our affairs, well-grounded AAs seem to have the ability, by God's grace, to take these troubles in stride and to turn them into demonstrations of faith. Real life happens. Sometimes we need the faith to keep on carrying on, even when we're heartbroken and we lose everything. Courage, faith, self-esteem, and to grieve our losses when most important. We have seen AAs suffer lingering and fatal illnesses with little complaint and often in good cheer. Well, mine aren't fatal, but I've got some chronic ailments, and I wouldn't have them if I hadn't lived long enough to get them. And also, the passage of time, 55 years, I've got some dings and dents in me. We have sometimes seen families broken apart by misunderstanding, tensions, or actual infidelity, who are reunited by the AA way of life. But, the thing of truth, if we actually admit the truth, it also opens up the choices of other people to either be with us or not be with us because of our conduct. And we can't bury those things. And we can't change what we did. But the truth part is, truthfully, everybody needs freedom of choice based on truth and sharing it. And worst of all, secrets keep us sick or stuck. Though the earning power of most AAs is relatively high, we have some members who have never seemed to get on their feet money-wise, and still others who encounter heavy financial reverses. Ordinarily, we see these situations met with fortitude and faith. When we learn how to, and that's part of life, learning life again. Like most people, we have found that when we take our big lumps as they come, we do take our big lumps as they come, but also like others, we often discover a great challenge in the lesser, more continuous problems of life, covering our, just basic needs met, and then wants are forgotten. Only by this means can we improve our chances for really happy and useful living. And as we grow spiritually, we find that our old attitudes towards our instincts need to undergo drastic revisions. Our desires for emotional security and wealth, for personal prestige and power, for romance and for family satisfactions, all of these have to be tempered and redirected. In other words, brought back into balance. We have learned that satisfaction of instincts cannot be the sole end and aim of our lives. If we place instincts first, we have got the cart before the horse. We shall be pulled backwards into disillusionment. But when we are willing to place spiritual growth first, which is living reality, rather than a fantasy, or trying to live a fantasy and feel the disappointment of it, to place spiritual growth first, living reality, and then and only do we have a real chance. So life on life's terms is the spiritual angle for me. And we only get a spiritual angle when we realise we are living spiritually in the moment of now, coping with it as best we can with what we have, and asking for help. Inclusion rather than exclusion, and thinking we have to do it all on our own. After we come to AA, if we go on growing, our attitudes and actions towards security, emotional security, and financial security commence to change profoundly. Our demand for emotional security for our own way had constantly thrown us into unworkable relationships or relations with other people. Though we were sometimes quite unconscious of this, the result always had been the same. So emotional security in my financial world was getting another pay rise, or becoming this, that, or the other. But I wanted too much of it, I guess, because I was never satisfied with where I got to, and I measured myself by the amount of money I was earning. What a poor measure of me, or a poor measure to use about me. I didn't know what value and what the currency was. Though there was sometimes quite unconscious of this, the result was always the same. Either we had tried to play God and dominate those about us, or we had insisted on being over-dependent on them. Where people had temporarily let us run their lives as though they were still children, we had felt very happy and secure ourselves. But when we finally resisted or ran away, we were bitterly hurt and disappointed. We blamed them, being quite unable to see that our unreasonable demands had been the cause, and we couldn't see exactly what we were doing. We thought we had to prove ourselves, demonstrate the way forward, come up with the answers, so often without including or even being level, treating people as children or treating people worse as a resource is very, very difficult to do in recovery. It brings in a new set of currency, which is love cherishing rather than being superficial, indifferent and material. When we had taken the opposite tack and had insisted, like infants ourselves, that people protect and take care of us, or that the world owed us a living, it's the question of, what have I done to deserve this? Well, simply, you're in that spot, and reality is happening. Then the result had been equally unfortunate. This often caused the people we had loved most to push us aside, or perhaps desert us entirely, because we were completely over-dependent and angry, resentful, and not nice. Our disillusionment had been hard to bear. We couldn't imagine people acting that way towards us. We had failed to see that though adults in years, we were still behaving childishly, trying to turn everybody, friends, wives, husbands, even the world itself, into protective parents. We had refused to learn the very hard lesson that over-dependence upon people is unsuccessful, because all people are fallible, and even the best of them will sometimes let us down, especially when our demands for attention become unreasonable. And don't forget, even at our best, let's get this right, even at our worst behaviour, it was the best we could be in that moment. And equally, if it's prolonged, why on earth should people stick around? And we don't deserve anything over and above anybody else in this life. Why on earth would we? Why on earth would we think that way? As we made spiritual progress, to my thoughts, by the way, a lot of people think differently to that the world does owe them something, that they do have a particular position. But that's just their view. I like to be equal, open, talk to anyone. I don't mind whether they're the leader of something or the person who sweeps the streets, because the person who sweeps my street has often got a point of view which I really, really appreciate. Their wisdom, their life. They are not a road sweeper, they're a human being with wisdom, and if you connect with somebody with wisdom, that's what counts. As we made spiritual progress, we saw through these fallacies. It became clear that if we ever were to feel emotionally secure among grown-up people, we'd have to put our lives on a give-and-take basis. We would have to develop the sense of being in partnership or brotherhood with all those around us. Partnership, equal, brotherhood, loving. We saw that we would need to give constantly of ourselves without demands for repayment. We were persistent. When we persistently did this, we gradually found that people were attracted to us as never before. And even if they failed us, we could be understanding and not too seriously offended. When we developed still more, we discovered the best possible source of emotional stability to be God Himself. In my case, truth, love and wisdom. The universe, providence, nature, whatever you want to call it, which suits you and your understanding of a higher power. Emotional stability to be God Himself, and I get the wisdom of stability through people and inclusion and sharing and really, really listening when I need to what they have to say about me. We found that dependence upon His perfect justice, forgiveness and love was healthy, and that it would work where nothing else would. If we really depended upon God, we couldn't very well play God to our fellows, nor would we feel the urge to wholly rely on human protection and care. So in the middle of the night, oh my God, what am I going to do? If I have that absolutely crippling fear which comes from nowhere sometimes, I start with the Serenity Prayer and work my way through into how do I find calmness, peace, openness through prayer and meditation, obviously, for me. And I get back to a place of, this takes time, of course. In recovery, a night of discomfort is nothing to worry about, really, but a night in my drinking days where I couldn't sleep, and I urgently needed to have rest between, say, midnight and 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock when I would wake up in the morning, and then jump out of bed and be ready for work. Those were the longest nights when I couldn't sleep, the longest nights ever when under the influence. So this new outlook was, we learned, something especially necessary to us alcoholics, for alcoholism had been a lonely business, even though we had been surrounded by people who loved us. But when self-will had driven everybody away, and our isolation had become complete, it caused us to play the big shot in the cheap bar rooms, and then fare forth alone on the street to depend on the charity of passers-by, or in my case a park bench. And it was a very lonely business. We were still trying to find emotional security by being dominating or dependent upon others, even when our fortunes had not ebbed that much, and we nevertheless found ourselves alone in the world. We still vainly tried to be secure by some unhealthy kind of domination or dependence, and I know this was true of me. And it swapped around, sometimes dependent, sometimes dominant, and it was just unpleasant. It was just an unpleasant way of life. For those of us who were like that, AA had a very special meaning. Through it we began to learn right relations with people who understand us. We don't have to be alone anymore. And this bit doesn't apply to me because I never got married, but I tell you what, I had absolutely adorable, loving relationships with women in my life. And my behaviour most often drove them away, or I ran away. Most married folks in AA have very happy homes. To a surprising extent, AA has offset the damage to family life brought about by years of alcoholism. But just like all other societies, we do have sex and marital problems, and sometimes they are distressingly acute. Permanent marriage breakups and separations, however, are unusual in AA. Our main problem is not how we are to stay married, it is how to be more happily married by eliminating the severe emotional twists that have so often stemmed from alcoholism. Now, I have no evidence of that, but if a person straightens out, man or woman, and finds that they are still cherishing and loving and acquainted and understood in this new way by their partner, I've seen marvellous things happen and marvellous relationships flourish, and I have gratitude to see that. Anyway, carry on. Nearly every sound human being experiences at some time of life a compelling desire to find a mate of the opposite sex, with whom the fullest possible union can be made, spiritual, mental, emotional and physical. This mighty urge is the root of great human accomplishments, a creative energy that deeply influences our lives. God fashioned us that way, or nature did. Nature, providence, truth, love and wisdom, God, higher power. So our question will be this: how by ignorance, compulsion and self-will did we misuse this gift for our own destruction? We AAs cannot pretend to offer full answers to the age-old perplexities, but our own experience does provide certain answers that work for us. When alcoholism strikes, very unnatural situations may develop which work against marriage, partnership and compatible union. If the man is affected, the wife must become the head of the house, often the breadwinner. As matters get worse, the husband becomes a sick and irresponsible child who needs to be looked after and extricated from endless scrapes and impasses. Very gradually, usually without any realization of the fact, the wife is forced to become the mother of an erring boy. And if she had a strong maternal instinct to begin with, the situation is aggravated. Obviously not much partnership can exist under those conditions. The wife usually goes on doing the best she knows how, but meanwhile the alcoholic alternately loves and hates her maternal care. A pattern is thereby established that may take a lot of undoing later on. Nevertheless, the influence of AA's 12 steps in these situations are often set right. And I can't speak on those because I haven't, well, actually in a relationship, in sobriety, all these issues came up. And in the end, compatibility, I don't know that was the problem. What the problem was were we living in the moment, and did we have a dream together? And the answer was no. And there was no setting that right, because our pathways were going in different directions in terms of life and lifestyle, and just life. So, there's no blame. The good news is we actually learned a lot. We actually learned a lot about life and living, just as people do when they're married. Anyway, when the distortion has been great, however, a long period of patient striving may be necessary. After the husband joins AA, the wife may become discontented, even highly resentful that Alcoholics Anonymous has done the very thing that all her years of devotion has failed to do. But don't forget, even as a husband or whatever, as an alcoholic, if you can't work it out on your own, how on earth can a partner or a family do what you can't do? But Alcoholics has done the very thing that all her years of devotion had failed to do. Her husband may become so wrapped up in AA and his new friends that he is inconsiderately away from home, more than when he drank. Seeing her unhappiness, he recommends AA's 12 steps and tries to teach her how to live. Boy, if you do that, you're in for trouble, especially the wife. Right wife, here we go with the 12 steps. Can you imagine the utter anger and resentment? How dare he? Or how dare she, if it's the wife who's learned all this? She naturally feels that for years she has made a far better job of living than he has. True. But then blame each other and asking when their marriage is ever going to be happy again. They may even begin to suspect it had never been any good in the first place. Compatibility, of course, can be so impossibly damaged that a separation may be necessary. But those cases are unusual ones. I can't answer to that. The alcoholic, realizing what his wife has endured, and now fully understanding how much he himself did damage her and his children, nearly always takes up his marriage responsibilities with a willingness to repair what he can and accept what he can't. He persistently tries all AA's 12 steps in his home, often with fine results. At this point he firmly but lovingly commences to behave like a partner instead like a bad boy. And above all, he is finally convinced that reckless romancing is not a way of life for him. I wish I'd learned that. Well, no, I don't wish. I just didn't learn that. And I was reckless with myself and others in romance. AA has many single alcoholics who wish to marry and are in a position to do so. Well, I am in a position to do so, but it might be a bit late. Some marry fellow AAs. How do they come out? On the whole, these marriages are very good ones. Their common suffering as drinkers, their common interest in AA and spiritual things often enhance such unions. It is only where the boy meets girl on AA campus and love follows at first sight that difficulties may develop, as in all life. The prospective partners need to be solid AAs and long enough acquainted to know that their compatibility at spiritual, mental and emotional levels is a fact and not wishful thinking. So you have to do a courtship, really. And I think that's actually a very wise thing to do. This is just me and my opinion. My courtships used to last about 2 hours or less. And that's just terrible when I look back. Anyway, not wishful thinking. They need to be as sure as possible that no deep-lying emotional handicap in either will be likely to rise up under later pressures to cripple them. The considerations are equally true and important for the AAs who marry outside of AA. With clear understanding and right growing up attitudes, very happy results do follow. And what can be said of many AA members who, for a variety of reasons, cannot have a family life? At first, many of these feel lonely, hurt and left out as they witness such domestic happiness about them. Or in my case, not so much happy around where I live, but they're not in AA. If they cannot have this kind of happiness, can AA offer them satisfactions of similar worth and durability? Yes, whenever they try hard to seek them out. Surrounded by so many AA friends, so-called loners tell us they no longer feel alone. And I think I was a loner for a lot of my life. I just was. I don't know that I wanted it that way, but maybe I needed it that way because of my drinking. These days I have lots of acquaintances and friends, people I care very deeply for, and am connected to family. Yes, whenever they try hard to seek them out. Surrounded by so many AA friends, so-called loners tell us they no longer feel lonely at all, or alone. In partnership with others, women and men, they can devote themselves to any number of ideas, people and constructive projects. Free of marital responsibilities, they can participate in enterprises which would be denied to family men and women. We daily see such members rendered prodigies of service and receive great joys in return. So we all have a part to play in life, inside and outside fellowship. And it is the journey, the quality, breadth, depth, width, whatever it is, cherishing what we do, cherishing ourselves. And, life is life, it just turns out the way it does. Maybe it doesn't turn out the way we would imagine or have wanted, but the actual life we have, based on reality, where the boundaries are growing outwards rather than becoming inwards, is wonderful. Where the possession of money or material things was concerned, our outlook underwent the same revolutionary change. With a few exceptions, all of us have been spendthrifts. Yes, I did. I gave money away. We threw money about in every direction with the purpose of pleasing ourselves and impressing other people. Well, not so much. I just gave it away to good causes and stuff. I didn't really talk about it. In our drinking time, we acted as if the money supply was inexhaustible, though between binges we'd sometimes go to the other extreme and become almost miserly. Without realising it, we were just accumulating funds for the next spree. Money was a symbol of pleasure and self-importance. When our drinking had become much worse, money was only an urgent requirement which could supply us with the next drink and the next temporary comfort of oblivion it brought. That's where it got me, definitely. I don't like the fact that happened, but I do see that is what happened to me. Upon entering AA, these attitudes were sharply reversed. They were reversed, but it didn't happen immediately, often going much too far in the opposite direction. The spectacle of years of waste threw us into panic. There simply wouldn't be time, we thought, to rebuild our shattered fortunes. How could we ever take care of those awful debts, possess a decent home, educate the kids and set something by for old age? Financial importance was no longer our principal aim, though. We now clamoured for material security. Even when we were well re-established in our business, these terrible fears often continued to haunt us. This made us misers and penny pinchers all over again. Complete financial security we must have, or else. We forgot that most alcoholics in AA have an earning power considerably above average. We forgot the earning power We forgot the immense goodwill of our brother AAs, who were only too eager to help us to better jobs when we deserved them. When we were fit for purpose again, I suppose. We forgot the actual or potential financial insecurity of every human being in the world. And worst of all, we forgot God. In money matters, we had faith only in ourselves, and not too much of that. And I guess, where are we with all this? For me, it's needs met, once forgotten. And the crippling need to keep on earning more and more was in me back in the drinking days. That is not me anymore. This all meant, of course, that we were still far off balance. When a job still looked like a mere means of getting money rather than an opportunity for service, when the acquisition of money for financial independence looked more important than the right dependence upon God, or just the right dependence in the world, interdependence, we were still victims of unreasonable fears, and these were fears which would make a serene and useful existence at any financial level quite impossible. But as time passed, we found that with the help of AA's 12 steps we could lose those fears, no matter what our material prospects were. We could cheerfully perform humble labour without worrying about tomorrow. If our circumstances happened to be good, we no longer dreaded a change for the worse, for we had learned that these troubles could be turned into great values. It did not matter too much what our material condition was, but it did matter what our spiritual condition was. And my spiritual condition is always about, am I in the moment of now and able to cope with it? Money gradually became our servant and not our master. It became a means of exchanging love and service with those about us. When with God's help, or a higher power's guidance, good conscience, we calmly accepted our lot, then we found we could live at peace with ourselves and show others who still suffered the same fears that they could get over them too. We found that freedom from fear was more important than freedom from want. In other words, needs met, wants forgotten. That's how I see it. Let's here take note of our improved outlook upon the problems of personal importance, power, ambition and leadership. These were reefs upon which many of us came to shipwreck during our drinking careers. But practically every boy in the United States dreams of being or becoming our president. He wants to be his country's #1 man, and he gets older and he sees the impossibility of this. He can smile good-naturedly at his childhood dream. In later life he finds that the real happiness is not to be found in just trying to be a #1 man, or even a first-rater, in the heartbreaking struggle for money, romance or self-importance. He learns that he can be content as long as he plays well whatever cards life deals him. He's still ambitious, but not absurdly so, because he can now see and accept actual reality. He's willing to stay right-sized, actual in reality, in the moment of now, coping with it. Who would have thought it would be so simple, but also difficult because of the ambitions we set ourselves in dark days, or because that's what we thought we ought to be. Ask anyone who got to the top of the tree a bit too fast, and what was life like, and how did their values change? Non-alcoholics is a good way to start. But also, what about alcoholics, or rather workaholics? But not so with alcoholics. When A was quite young, a number of eminent psychologists and doctors made an exhaustive study of a good-sized group of so-called problem drinkers. The doctors weren't trying to find out how different we were from one another. They sought to find whatever personality traits, if any, this group of alcoholics had in common. They finally came up with a conclusion that shocked the AA members of that time. These distinguished men had the nerve to say that most alcoholics under investigation were still childish, emotionally sensitive and grandiose. Or, we hadn't grown up, we weren't sure what our feelings were, we never knew how to express them, so that we were very sensitive, and if anybody criticised us, we got grandiose. How dare you? Grandiosity is absolutely unhelpful. Grandiose often means that we think we've got the right idea for other people, when in fact we haven't even got the right idea for ourselves, because we haven't learned what those things are. How we alcoholics did resent that verdict. Well, maybe I laughed at myself quite quickly, because I'd been one of those less eminent psychologists. We would not believe that our adult dreams were often truly childish. Well, mine were. And considering the rough deal life had given us, well, it had, because I always chose the rough hard tasks. We felt it perfectly natural that we were sensitive. Well, I only started to get really, really sensitive to the human condition when my condition became very, very sensitive as well, and that took a long time. As to our grandiose behaviour, we insisted that we had been possessed of nothing but a high and legitimate ambition to win the battle of life. Well, maybe once I understood that's what I was doing, I still don't know the U2 song. I still don't know what I'm looking for. Back then, I didn't know what I was looking for. Back then, I often did what people asked me to do. Said yes, and then tried to find out how to do it. To fit in. I was desperate to fit in. In the years since, however, most of us come to agree with those doctors. We have had a much keener look at ourselves and those about us, which is what the steps do, especially the life story. But don't overplay your life story, or you'll get stuck in it, rather than come through sharing it, and then 6, 7, 8 and 9, step 6, 7, 8 and 9, working on a daily basis with those. So it's not two-stepping ever. In the years since, however, most of us have come to agree with those doctors. We have had a much keener look at ourselves and those about us. We have seen that we were prodded by unreasonable fears or anxieties. I did have lots of fear and anxiety, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Into making a life business of winning fame, money, and what we thought, it might not have been fame and money to start with, and what we thought was leadership. Ask any politician. So false pride became the reverse side of that ruinous coin marked fear. We simply had to be number one people to cover up our deep-lying inferiorities. In fitful successes we boasted of greater feats to be done. In defeat we were bitter. If we didn't have much of any worldly success, we became depressed and cowed. Then people said we were of the inferior type. But now we see ourselves as chips off the same old block. True. At heart we had all been abnormally fearful. I agree. It mattered little whether we had sat on the shore of life drinking ourselves into forgetfulness, or had plunged into recklessly and willfully beyond our depths and ability. The result was the same. All of us had nearly perished in a sea of alcohol, or more often these days in an ocean of alcohol. Because I'm grandiose. No, I'm not. Sea of alcohol will do. But today, in well-matured AAs, these distorted drives have been restored to something like their true purpose and direction. We no longer strive to dominate or rule those about us in order to gain self-importance. We can no longer seek fame and honour in order to be praised. When by devoted service to family, friends, business or community we attract widespread affection and are sometimes singled out for posts of greater responsibility and trust, we try to be humbly grateful and exert ourselves the more in the spirit of love and service. So the measures change. So rather than the material success that we were looking for, it's about how to love, be loved and useful. And that applies in business as much as family or our community life. I'd rather love people and cherish them for who they are and not whatever position they may hold. Indeed, that might get in the way. Still more wonderful is the feeling that we do not have to be specially distinguished among our fellows in order to be useful and profoundly happy. Which is why at meetings I quite like greeting, standing outside when I can stand long enough, and just pondering the world and the stars and whatever else is going on, or look at a tree and feel happy about that. How odd, eh? And, that people think it's odd. People think it's odd. Why are you people so happy just to stand about and chat about life? Haven't you got anything to do? That's how it used to be. Not many of us can be leaders of prominence, nor do we wish to be. Service gladly rendered, obligations squarely met, troubles well accepted or solved with God's help, or providence, as you choose. The knowledge that at home or in the world outside we are partners in a common effort. The well understand that in God's sight all human beings are important. The proof that love freely given surely brings a return. The certainty that we are no longer isolated and alone in self-constructed prisons, where we are in a prison in alcohol. The surety that we need no longer be square pegs in round holes, but can fit and belong in God's scheme of things, or just simply as providence is, life on life's terms. Your God of your understanding, truth, love, wisdom, as it is for you. These are the permanent and legitimate satisfactions of right living, for which no amount of pomp and circumstance, no heap of material possessions could possibly be substitutes. True ambition is not what we thought it was. True ambition is the deep desire to live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God, or as nature and providence is, the equal of everyone, and everyone equal to us. But we all have a right to be here. And there is something in there which is so profoundly important and changes the way we view life. We can't impose that view on people, nor can we make it so. People have to come to that conclusion. But there is great fear in letting go of position. No, that's something I don't need to worry about, I hope. Yes. These little studies of AA's 12 steps now come to a close. We have been considering so many problems that it may appear that AA consists mainly of racking dilemmas and troubleshooting. Funnily enough, it's not. To a certain extent, it is true. We have been talking about problems because we are problem people who have found a way up and out, and who wish to share our knowledge of that way with all who can use it. For it is only by accepting and solving our problems that we begin to get it right with ourselves and with the world about us, and with Him who presides over us all. Understanding is the key to right principles and attitudes, and right action is the key to good living. Therefore, the joy of good living in the theme of AA is the theme of AA's 12th step. With each passing day of our lives, may every one of us sense more deeply the inner meaning of AA's simple prayer, which is why it always ends my videos. Can do, can't do, wisdom to know the difference. With each passing day of our lives, may every one of us sense more deeply the inner meaning of AA's simple prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It's quite a long step, isn't it? Because it incorporates them all. And the God grants us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Always works in the moment, and always works today.